Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our penalty enhancements demand response investigation and tooling revised draft proposal, PERDIT for our acronym short. Welcome to the stakeholder meeting. My name is Brenda Corona on behalf of the Stakeholder Affairs Group. We welcome you to this meeting. We do have a few folks here on the panelist groups, starting off with Dinesh, our policy developer. He'll be kicking us off. We do have Hawaida Ahmed, who's also our Senior Resource Management Analyst, Angelica Stahl, who is our Process Quality and Enforcement Analyst lead. And then we have David Zutlow, who is our Lead Counsel, and Jill Powers as our Demand Response Distributed Energy Sector Manager. And if there's others that will be joining, I think we have Priyanka, who'll be added really shortly, and she's also our Senior Advisor for Energy Acquisition Data. So a few folks here, we'll get first as housekeeping reminders as this call is being recorded for informational and communities purposes only. Any related transcriptions should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. If you do experience any technical issues, we will be having Silas, our event producer, help us out. This meeting, it does not have an attendance sheet, so you'll be able to visibly see all participants on the call. And then Silas, go ahead and add Priyanka from attendees so that way we can have her in our panelist group. To ask a question in the WebEx, we will ask if you please use the raise hand icon above the chat window on the very right-hand corner. This will add you to the queue. On those who are on the phone line only, press *3 to be added. If you do have any technical issues, let us know through chat. And also a reminder, please say your full name and affiliation before stating a comment, and then we'll be able to address your question, knowing your full name and affiliation. And then we'll get started with today's agenda, with Dinesh kicking us off with the background on PERDIT, and then he'll go over the revised draft proposal Q&A, and then we'll have an open discussion. We don't plan to this meeting might not be too long, so luckily we have this meeting kind of reserved for 2 hours, but we'll have our policy lead and a few others in the panelist group kind of take guidance and also your questions from our stakeholder community. But also just letting everyone know, we don't have that slide for the process timeline, but we are currently in the proposal development phase, moving towards the final proposal. So the next step will be posting draft final proposal next month. So we'll give those key dates at the next steps. At this time, I'll go ahead and test Dinesh's audio and video, and then let's hand off. And you have access to move your slides, Dinesh, too, and I can see you. Go ahead, and I can hear you, too.
Thank you, Brenda. Really appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dinesh, and I'm the policy lead for PEDRIT. Okay, so this is the policy initiative stakeholder process. Great. Moving into background. So PEDRIT seeks to address deferred topics from the Rules of Conduct Enhancements Initiative. So all the proposed changes affect the Rules of Conduct, Section 37 of the tariff. The purpose of the Rules of Conduct is to provide fair notice and an equal environment for market participants, redress market manipulation, anti-competitive behavior, and foster general confidence in ISO markets. As policy lead for PEDRIT, I strive to be as transparent, respectful, responsive to feedback as possible. Thanks for matching accordingly in comments and questions as we work together to improve our shared market. So the following is a summary of the scope of PEDRIT and Rules of Conduct enhancements. Thank you for your input on the inaccurate meter data penalty materiality threshold or waiver discussion. Based on those comments, the revised straw proposal contains a materiality threshold for your feedback. So in terms of timeline, the revised straw proposal is the final straw proposal iteration prior to the draft final proposal, and this is subject to stakeholder feedback. Staff plans to present PEDRIT to the Joint ISO Board and WEAM governing body in September. Given that the Rules of Conduct applies to all market participants, PEDRIT is classified under joint authority. The full draft timeline, including future stakeholder meeting dates, is located in the straw proposal. Moving on to the topics. So first off, PEDRIT proposes defining the penalty structure for demand response monitoring data. So currently, missing or late DR monitoring data is not penalized due to disproportionate penalty design and undefined timeline submission. The revised straw proposal recommends T plus 52B as the submission deadline with a flat $1,000 penalty for late data and an additional flat $3,000 for missing data past T plus 214B. The penalty would be applied per SCID and be the same missing one or multiple monitoring data files. This element has not changed since the straw proposal. What has changed is based on stakeholder feedback, the revised straw proposal includes that penalties should apply for not submitting the minimum of 45 days of historical data. Before, the ISO was considering a 90-day threshold. Now it's 45. Note that this is a minimum, so if there's additional data subject to submission requirements, the timeline and penalty structure that has been detailed here apply. So currently, only the weather matching baseline methodology requires over 45 days of monitoring data. However, in the future, there may be other baseline methodologies that require additional days and data. All right, great. Moving on to examples. So the first example, SCX scheduling quota X submitted 10 DR resources, base and treatment data for trade date March 5th on T plus 55B, 3 days after the T plus 52B deadline. So the proposed penalty is calculated by trade date. So because the data was submitted past T plus 52B for trade date March 5th, it will be one trade date late. So one trade date times $1,000 is the $1,000 total penalty. Next example. So scheduling coordinator Y fails to submit the minimum 45 days of CBL data for 2 of its 5 resources for a single trade date. SCY is notified but does not respond with the remaining resource data by T plus 214B. So similar to the first example, SCY failed to meet submission requirements for a single trade date. However, SCY failed to meet the requirements for both T plus 52B and T plus 214B, right? So the T plus 52B is penalized at $1,000 per trade date. The T plus 214B is penalized additional $3,000 per trade date for a total penalty of $4,000. Okay, example number 3. So scheduling coordinator Z submits 30 days of historical load data for a single trade date, which fails to meet that minimum of 45 days of data for 2 of its 5 resources. After notification from the ISO on T plus 53B, scheduling coordinator Z submits the remaining 15 days of historical load data on T plus 65B. So given that scheduling coordinator Z did not meet the submission requirements by T plus 52B for that one trade date, the penalty will be $1,000. Okay, great. Any questions at this point in time? And feel free to raise your hand going forward if there are questions that do come up. Just Brenda or Silas, feel free to interrupt me if there is any.
Will do. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, moving on to the next topic. So this is streamlining the investigative process. So currently, the rules of conduct investigative process includes 3 letters: the notice, the findings, and penalty description. At each step, there's that 30-day period for stakeholder input or appeal. PEDRIT proposes to have a 2-letter process instead. So when stakeholders receive a notice of findings, that also includes the description of the penalty. So it won't be 2 separate letters. Based off of stakeholder feedback describing existing business practices, the ISO, Can you still hear me, Brenda?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Here. Okay, based off of stakeholder feedback describing existing business practices, the ISO now proposes maintaining the status quo of listed generator owners as potential additional contacts in the rules of conduct investigator process. Again, this is the status quo and what the ISO is currently doing. A couple notes on this topic. So the three-letter process was originally designed for complex penalty investigations with undefined penalty amounts. So today, the ISO issues traffic ticket-like penalties with all subjectivity related to the penalties under FERC jurisdiction. Right? That is different than what the process originally started with. According to the tariff, the ISO must provide investigated market participants an opportunity to present any issues of fact or other information relevant to the potential rules of conduct violation. And hence, the ISO must consider all such information or data presented. So if the ISO then, with that information, if the ISO needs to ask the market participant for follow-up questions or about that presented information, the ISO will do so before communicating the results of the investigation or appeal. Any additional basis, any subjectivity-based appeal falls under FERC jurisdiction. So that's something that the ISO can't make a ruling on. It's only facts-based, right? So that needs to be appealed to FERC rather than the ISO. Okay. So the next topic we have is the tolling topic. The current FERC penalty tolling process requires upfront payment from the market participant. And then if the stakeholder appeals the penalty to FERC and informs the ISO by the dispute deadline, the ISO returns the money pending FERC's decision about whether there is actually a violation or not and what the penalty amount should be. So the revised straw proposal, like the straw proposal, recommends getting rid of that upfront payment. Instead, the entity has 30 days to provide the ISO with evidence of a FERC appeal. If no appeal, the ISO then collects the penalty amount. So there's no changes from the straw proposal here. One clarification is that the ISO believes the scheduling coordinator or market participant may still appeal to FERC after the 30 calendar days. That's that tolling deadline, with the penalty refunded if the appeal is successful at FERC. Okay, here's a flow chart of the proposed investigation, penalty tolling, and sanction process. This is also linked in. This is also included in the straw proposal. If you'd like to get a more zoomed-in version of the flow chart. And this documents out all of the steps in the new proposal, where there's the two letters followed by that tolling process, and hopefully, and as always, feel free to reach out with questions. Feel free to include questions in your comments. We're happy to take those if they come up. So in the last round, so we had a discussion around whether or not there should be a minimum materiality threshold for inaccurate meter data penalties or some sort of first-time waivers. Stakeholders expressed strong support for this topic. In response, the revised straw, and after taking it back, taking your comments back internally, the revised straw proposal recommends inaccuracies under 3% or under 3 megawatts of a day's actual meter data to no longer be considered a tariff violation. So that would be that 3%, 3 megawatt would be that threshold. That's the design that we are recommending at this point in time. This is due to a number of implementation factors, ease of implementation, and also also just in terms of how it lines up with the current rules of conduct process. So inaccuracies below that threshold wouldn't trigger the investigation or penalty, right? Market adjustments continue to apply, so it's only that threshold is only for the penalty, it's not for the market adjustment, and failure to exercise due diligence in submitting accurate settlement quality meter data may separately violate FERC's market behavior rules. Okay, so examples round 2. So generator A submits initial settlement quality meter data of 15 megawatts for the trade date on time, right? So when we're saying for the day, this is 15 megawatts total over the 24 hours, right? So later on, after that deadline, generator A realizes the actual settlement quality meter data amounts to 10 megawatts for that trade date. So generator A resubmits the meter data upon that discovery. So we can run the following tests here, right? Is the inaccuracy less than 3 megawatts or less than 3% of the actual meter data? In this example, 5 megawatts is greater than, the 5 megawatt change is greater than the 3 megawatt threshold. 5 megawatts is also 50% of the actual meter data, which is greater than 3%. Therefore, in this case, since both potential thresholds are not met, the generator A would be subject to a penalty. Okay. Example number 2. So load B submits initial settlement quality meter data of 9,900 megawatts for that 24-hour period. After T plus 52B, load B realizes the actual settlement quality meter data amount was 10,000, not 9,900 megawatts, and then submits that revision to the ISO. Here, 100 megawatts is greater than the 3 megawatt threshold. However, 100 megawatts is 1% of that actual load SQMD settlement quality meter data, which is lower than that 3% threshold. Therefore, based on that percentage change threshold amount, load B is not subject to a penalty. In example C, generator C submits, or example 3, generator C submits initial settlement quality meter data of 3 megawatts for the day. After T plus 52B, generator C resubmits at 5 megawatts. Running that same test again, 2 megawatts is less than the 3 megawatt threshold. Therefore, generator C is not subject to penalty, even though the 40% change is greater than the 3% threshold, right? So no penalty in this example. The final example, generator D submits initial settlement quality meter data of 51 megawatts total for the trade date on time. After T plus 52B, generator D resubmits for 50 megawatts for that day. So in this example, 1 megawatt is less than the 3 megawatt threshold. Also, 2% change is under the 3% change materiality threshold. Therefore, generator D is not subject to the penalty because it meets both of those thresholds. Even if generator D had met one threshold, like in the last example, that would still be, the generator D would not be subject to a penalty. Okay, so with that, that's the main bulk of the presentation here. Questions?
Don't see any questions in queue, but for those who are on the WebEx, just click the raise hand above the participant and chat window. And I don't see any questions in the chat as well. And Silas, can you confirm any questions in audio only? Oh, there we have Jennifer. Jennifer, please introduce your affiliation and the work where you work, please. Go ahead.
Jennifer, your line is unmuted. You should be able to go ahead.
You guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Hi, this is Jennifer Gerard. I'm with Idaho Power. I put a message in the chat, but I think I realized I did it privately. So my question was, so if you are not subject, or so if you determine that there's a threshold that's under, or you meet the threshold that's under that 3% or 3 megawatts, will the meter data still need to be reprocessed or sent to CAISO, or would it also be determined that it's sufficient not to resubmit that meter data?
Hey, Jen, thanks for your question. Good question. So that meter data would still be required to be submitted to CAISO. So we're expecting all meter data to be submitted as accurately as possible. And so even if it meets that threshold, we do need to see that data so that we can run the resettlements on it.
Okay, thank you. And then I had one more question, and maybe this is an example I'm looking for. I think in each of your examples, you showed kind of individual generators or load. What if you have a resubmittal? Because for WEAM entities, that typically has a resubmittal of a generator as well as for your ELAP. So how is that threshold determined in that case? Does it look at each of those individually? Does it look at it combined? How would you look at that?
So from my understanding on this, that question about the ELAP is something that, so Pedrit is also building off of the changes that were made in the rules of conduct enhancements process, right? That first round, right? So in that round, one of the determinations that was made was that if there's an ELAP that's derived from a generator inaccuracy, right, we're only going to go for the generator. We're not going for the ELAP, right? So this is building on top of that, right? So we're looking at the generator again, right? And then if the generator is, that inaccuracy is meeting the penalty or meeting that threshold, then there's no penalty. If the generator is not meeting that threshold, then there's a penalty on the inaccuracy for the generator amount. Did that answer your question?
I think so. So what I'm hearing is that it really is the ELAP resource itself is not going to be part of that evaluation. It would just be the generator. Is that what I heard you say?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That answered my questions.
Thanks, Jen. Okay. So I'm seeing in the chat a question from, and apologies if I mispronounce here, from Naur, from Olivine. So does the 3% or 3 megawatt threshold apply to DR as well for corrections after T plus 52B? Good question. So this applies to the settlement quality meter data portion for DR resources, right? So there's the monitoring data, which is its own separate category, right? And then there's the settlement quality meter data. So whatever is settlement quality meter data that is inaccurate, coming from DR resources, coming from load, coming from generator, that threshold applies there. Let me know if that answered your question or not, either in the chat or verbally. Great, thank you for that confirmation. Brenda, Silas, do we have anyone else in the queue?
I'm not seeing any hands raised on the audio line at this time.
Okay, great. Just want to put it out there, is there this is also a great time for open discussion. If there's any questions or concerns or just general comments about the PEDRIT initiative. So just giving it 5-10 seconds in case anyone has anything they'd like to say. Okay, great. Well, I'll pass this back to Brenda then for closing out here.
Thank you, Dinesh. I don't see any more questions, but this call is being recorded for those who are listening or unable to attend. And we'll be posting it on the Stakeholder Center on policy initiatives and under penalty demand response. And so if I can get Silas' presentation rights, I'll be moving on to the next steps for this initiative. Right now, we are planning to take comments until June 14th for the revised draw proposal, as well as this meeting. So we will be posting that comment template hopefully either tomorrow, but other than that, it'll be a comment template available on the policy initiatives tool. And then for the upcoming dates, milestones we have is we plan to hopefully publish the draft final proposal next month, as well have a discussion, a stakeholder discussion on that on the 25th of July. But we'll be sure to send out a notice for that information. But later this month, we also have the Market Performance and Planning Forum. We'll also be going over the annual policy initiatives as well, any timelines regarding all the policy initiatives. That's like a highlight. So there's also other opportunities to add comments now, and then also with the upcoming policy initiatives that will be discussed at the NPPF on June 27th. And then this is the link to the, well, that's not the link actually, that's the old link. Let me provide a new link to the CAISO website. So the CAISO launched last week, the new website. If everyone could go ahead and use the link on the chat, I'll take you to the penalty enhancements, demand response, and investigation and tolling. That's where everything from, even from the previous meetings, will be having all the information there. So feel free to visit that. And you can also send us an email to ISO Stakeholder Affairs for any questions. The next announcement we have is the save the date, and we'll actually be having registration opening up pretty soon. I would say within maybe next week. We anticipate opening up registration for the Stakeholder Symposium. As this symposium event is one day for the event on the 30th, but we do have a welcome reception the evening before, which will be a sweet opportunity for everyone who hasn't been at the symposium, but also network with us at this event. The information of the venue and everything will be disclosed really soon on the registration and on the website. But if you do have any questions on possibly sponsoring and being a sponsor event, feel free to send us an email, symposiumreg@kaiso.com, but also you'll be allowed to register as a sponsor once we open up registration. So those options will be available. And then I think that's it. The last few slides are appendix. So those are just the flow charts that were provided on previous meetings, but it's helpful. And those links will direct you to the proposal if you hyperlink them, if you click on the hyperlink. But I don't see any other questions in queue for our team here today. And I thank everyone for all the panelists who have been participating, helping out, our policy developer, Dinesh, and then others for their technical expertise. At this time, I will go ahead and pass it to Silas as we will close this call. And thanks so much for joining.
Thank you to all of our speakers, and thank you all so much in the audience for joining us today. With that, the conference is now concluded, and you may disconnect.